Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this final day of the online portion of the Oxford Rural Farming Conference. Really happy to be here. And thank you so much for tuning into the session about turning a small farm into a catalyst for community development. So as I'm sure most of y'all know, I'm going to do the rundown though, but we're going to be in this room for an hour and we're going to have this conversation with Dennis Hutson and Kayode-Kadara. And then we are going to move into a Zoom for a Q&A with Dennis and Kayode. So please make sure to drop your questions in the chat. Someone at ORFC will be tracking that for us. And yeah, without further ado, we're just going to get started. And so today we're talking about TAC Farm and how they are using their farm to transform their community. TAC Farm is located in Allensworth, California, which is in the Central Valley of California. And for those of you who do not know, the Central Valley produces a tremendous 1/3 of produce grown in the United States. And other than being a produce powerhouse for the nation, this region is also known for worsening droughts, depleted soils, sinking towns, and communities bombarded with toxic air and polluted water from industrial agriculture that's really rampant in the area. Cities in the Central Valley even often make like worst places to live list due to these and other factors, but there's so much more to the area than this. All around the Central Valley, small farms are practicing sustainable polyculture, and more often than not, these small farms are stewarded by people of color. And things are no different in Allensworth, California, a town with a unique and rich history of Black determination and agrarianism, where TAC Farm is located. So today we're talking to the co-founders, Dennis Hutson and Kayode-Kadara, who are working to return the town to its former roots, using their farm as a catalyst for widespread change, despite the many challenges of farming in general and the climate crisis. So yeah, I'm just gonna start now. Dennis, can you describe present-day Allensworth to us? Dennis, you're muted.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. When I think in terms of Allensworth, one of the best descriptors is it is a small, impoverished, rural community. It is mostly Latino. Originally, it was all Black, but now it's about maybe 95, 97% Hispanic, Latin. And I would say most of the people here in this community are farm workers. And there are just a lot of human need in this community. And I would say it's a community that lacks infrastructure to a great extent. So that's a good understanding of what this town is. Many of the people who live here are farm workers. And I think we are in a definitely good situation to, with our project, to enhance this community.
Thank you. And what are some of the biggest challenges? I know you already mentioned some of them that Allensworth faces, and conversely, what are some of its greatest strengths? Kayode or Dennis? Yeah.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, the Central Valley of California has quite a number of issues. For us here in Allensworth, our biggest issue is arsenic in our groundwater. Most of the communities here in the Central Valley rely on groundwater for domestic use. So with arsenic being a major issue, it's essentially a major challenge for us. We have no economic base. And as Dennis mentioned earlier, we suffer from lack of appropriate and adequate infrastructure. We have issues with sewer, wastewater management. We have issues with distribution of potable water to families. We are in a food desert. To buy milk, eggs, if you don't have chickens in the backyard to provide eggs and stuff like that, you have to drive 15 miles one way to the closest community around us. And we have the big issue with climate change. Drought has been a major factor. We've seen groundwater depletion. We've seen communities or portions of communities that are sinking because of dramatic extraction of groundwater, where you have land just dropping. And then one of the other huge issues we have is brain drain. When our students graduate from our elementary school here, they go to school next door in a different community. They end up going to college north of us and south of us, but none of them want to come back. There's nothing to come back to in our community at this point, but we're working on it.
Nice. And Dennis, can you share some of the strengths of Allensworth?
Sure. I believe some of the strengths are there's a certain diversity here with the Latino community, family oriented. There's a small number of African American families here. I say it's about 5 at the most. But the people, since they are farm workers, there is a fairly general knowledge of agriculture. We in Allensworth are in the Central Valley, which is, as you mentioned in the introduction, one of the major agricultural producers in the world, in the Central Valley. And so it's what we propose to do with TAC Farm, Teaching and Innovation Farm, is something that is conducive to this environment. It's not something that's misplaced, but it's conducive to this environment. So, and I see that as a strength. Many of the people who work in as farm workers, they have an interest, I believe, in agriculture, and we just want to simply help them to, as well as other generations of people, to know how to do regenerative, sustainable agriculture, so that we are working in harmony with nature as opposed to against nature.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, let me also add to that. We have the Allensworth State Historic Park,
Yes,
which is in our backyard. This is, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I think Dennis will get to that in a little bit. But we have a state park dedicated to the founders of this community. Community was founded in 1908. So there's a state park that is basically a museum that showcases houses and the infrastructure that was in place back then for the downtown portion of the township back then. We have this area, our community happens to be in the flight path for migrating birds as they go from north to south, north to south, south to north, and stuff like that. They stop in our general area. It happens to be a major bird watching area. And we have folks from all over the world that come through here to see all these different birds. But to me, one of the strongest strengths that we have is the fact that we are retired professionals.
Mm-hmm.
We are retired professionals with backgrounds that assist with community development. I happen to be, my background is in city planning and engineering. Dennis is planning, talk about it, Dennis. But I think that kind of helps when you know what needs to happen. We've been there, done that. So when you come to a community like this, where, as Dennis mentioned, it's a bedroom community for farm workers. A lot of them don't have the know-how or the expertise to help move things accordingly. we bring that to the table.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like Allensworth, as you mentioned, a large community of farm workers who, and I think from what I've read before in the past, just generally speaking, a lot of farm workers who come to the US to work, were farmers in their own lands. And so there's a lot of like a baseline level of knowledge there and some interest, and also this really rich history that Allensworth already has of being a town of like Black farmers. So can you tell us a little bit, can you tell us about that history of Allensworth, that rich history, and how it was founded in the early 1900s?
Yeah, Colonel Allensworth was a former slave. He was in fact born into slavery, and when he was like 12 years old, he was learning. He was learning, growing up with the slave master's child, learning how to read and write. They used to play school, and one day the slave master found out that the son was teaching Allen how to read and write and all, and so he made up his mind he was going to sell Allensworth. The mother worked in the house of the slave master, and helped her son to escape in the middle of the night because she knew he was going to be sold the next day. And so he escaped and went north and joined the Union Navy. And he was in the Navy for a few years when the Civil War was being fought. After the Civil War, he got out and went to school, and he and his brother opened up a business in St. Louis. And then I guess some military people happened to be on leave and came into St. Louis to his restaurant and found out that Allensworth had been was a veteran, and they started speaking to him about being a chaplain because he was a minister at this point. And so he wrote Grover Cleveland, I believe, who was the president at the time, and he was accepted to be a chaplain. And so he came back into the military, this time in the Army, and became a chaplain for the Buffalo Soldiers who were out in the Southwest. And so he did that. And when he retired as a lieutenant colonel, which was the highest rank of any African American in the military at the time, and so he retired and came. He was in California. He was one of those persons who subscribed to the notion of Booker T. Washington, which is helping others to pull themselves up and to be more productive and to be participants in the society. So he sought to do that. And some of the people who had been in the military with him joined him. And so people from the Los Angeles area as well as the Bay Area joined him, and they bought land in the Central Valley, which is now Allensworth, so that they could be safe, they could be free in a literal sense, and be productive, have control over their destiny. And they succeeded in doing that very well until outside forces. And I think we can use our imagination and understand what these outside forces are that tried to destroy this town. One, you killed Colonel Allensworth. Two, they moved the railroad spur, which stopped here in this town, coming from the Los Angeles area or from the Bay Area, bringing goods and then taking goods. They moved the railroad spur to another community, which was all white, and that took away the economics of this community. And then they found arsenic in the water, and the realtors who sold the land who were supposed to drill wells for the community, and they reneged on that contract and did not do it, and it was not enforced. So those are some of the things. That's how this town got started. But Colonel Allensworth wanted this community to be a Tuskegee of the West. And for those of us who know about Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, George Washington Carver was a professor there, and he's a leading scientist with peanuts and all of that. But he was helping Black farmers with agriculture. And then Booker T. Washington was the president of Tuskegee.
Thank you. Yeah, so the town had such a inspiring and hopeful start with Colonel Allensworth, and it started to become known for this a safe haven for Black people, especially those who wanted to farm. And then due to racism, everything came to a screeching halt.
Right.
So much so that by I think 30-ish or so years later, you couldn't even find Allensworth on a map anymore.
That is correct.
Yeah, but then things started to turn around. So Kayode, could you tell me a little bit about the creation story and the backstory of TAC Farm?
Sure. Dennis's mother, my mother-in-law, I'm married to Dennis's twin sister. So we call her Mommy, Big Mommy. So Big Mommy moved to Allensworth. She bought property here in the late around 1978, moved here in 1979, and essentially became an unofficial mayor of this community. She always said she wanted to be part of history. She ended up being an advocate, an activist for the community. Anything that needed to be done to improve the quality of life of the residents at that time, she did. Well, my family, Dennis's family, and their other siblings' families spend a lot of time here in Allensworth. We lived in different parts of the state, but we all congregated here for holidays, some weekends, and as necessary, just to drive down to come visit Big Mommy. So we did this all of those years, but one day in the mid-90s, I don't remember the date or time exactly, but sometime in the mid-90s, Denise, my wife, Dennis and Denise, and myself we came to visit Big Mommy, and we were taking a drive around town, headed out of town actually, and Dennis made a comment about, gosh, all these years, all we've seen are those uses that nobody wants in their backyard. There had been proposals to bring in a project with 17,000 heads of cattle next door. Imagine the stench and the problem something like that would have done to it would have killed the community, basically. Big Mommy took this up with the governor at that time, fought it, defeated it. We've had projects where it's a turkey ranch, it's a grease trap ranch process, all those uses that nobody wants in their backyards were being proposed here. So we were taking this drive, and Dennis goes, it's just same old, nothing's happened all the years we've been coming through this community. And since he hasn't said it, Dennis he's a pastor, he's a minister. So Dennis asked the question, why hasn't anything happened? And he tells the story better than I will, but I'll do some justice to it. He said there was a divine intervention. He heard a voice that said, why don't you do something? And shortly thereafter, there had been discussions about, gosh, what can we do collectively to make something to make the community different? Well, in 2007, Dennis ended up purchasing 60 acres of land here in Allensworth with the intent or goal or vision to continue the Colonel Allensworth's dream of making this a self-sufficient community. That, to an extent, is how this all came about. Without acquiring the land, we wouldn't be talking about economic development, community development, and stuff like that. There was an impetus at that point to make something happen. He started it. We all fell in line and said, gee, what a great idea. Man, you have so much money. Thank God. That's how it all came.
You have to pray for somebody like him.
Okay, so as you mentioned, Dennis, you are a preacher, and Kayode, you have a background in planning. So how did you two become farmers? What was that trajectory like for you, Dennis?
Well, as a preacher, and he was alluding to some of some of my training earlier. I'm a businessman as well, and that's how this whole idea came about. I was working on an MBA degree, but I went to school in the Midwest, in Iowa, and then out north of Chicago, and up at Garrett Seminary, and so I was around agriculture, a lot of it, and then I used to just kind of fascinate myself with, wonder what it would be like to be a farmer, even though I don't like getting my hands dirty. I used to wonder what would it be like to be a farmer. And so when God gave me this vision for what we could do here in Allensworth, my response is an obedient response. Okay. And so that's how all of this happened. I never really thought I would be a farmer. I was wondering what kind of business God was going to lead me to, but this is what it is. And it is so exciting, working with the soil, working with animals. It's therapeutic. I'm a military retired person. I was a chaplain for 22 years. All right, 3 months and 11 days. Anyway, I was a retired chaplain, and it is therapeutic. And I'm hoping that we might even be able to do some things with veterans as well as time goes on.
For me, my story is a little kind of slightly different. I grew up, born and raised in a rural portion of northern Nigeria, where other than mining of tin ore, agriculture happened to be a major contributor to the economy. I grew up around farming in rural areas. So the passion and drive started early for me. I didn't think it'll be something I was interested in doing on a larger scale down the line. As a young person, I always had a small garden, grew a small garden. I raised animals. Mom was so generous with money to buy feed for whatever I wanted to raise, because it benefited the family overall. I had chickens, rabbits, ducks, geese, had dogs and cats. We didn't eat those, but everything else we, came back to the table, chicken, eggs, stuff like that. So over the years, going into a different profession and working as a professional, and then Dennis buys this land, and all of a sudden we're talking about a farm, rabbitry, and related uses on this. I mean, for me, it's just, wow, what an exciting time for me. It afforded me the opportunity to relive my childhood, raising animals, raising crops. And now with a professional background on what you need to do in terms of being able to manage and do certain things, it was a no-brainer. That's, for me, it's always been a passion. And I'll say through divine was the word here, just like with Dennis, he had the vision. Mine was, okay, you have the experience, you have the expertise, go do it. That's why I'm here.
Thank you. So you mentioned, at the start, you wanted this farm to be a self-sustaining farm for the community, and it's evolving into this teaching innovation farm, and really trying to use this as I mentioned before, a catalyst for development. So, um, could you share? Would love to hear from you, Dennis. First, what does community development mean to you?
Mhm. Community development to me means building a community that is um, meeting the needs of the residents, having the residents involved in uh, its growth, the plan. Uh, they are participants, and um, helping them to realize their purpose. And what my ultimate hope is that it helps this community to no longer feel powerless, hopeless, but to have a sense of pride uh, in their community. They help build this community to be of benefit, not just to themselves, but to this region in which this community is located. Um, I believe that Allensworth, um, it had a lot of potential. There were outside forces that did its best to destroy that potential. And now that we are here, and I believe God sent my mother here, which would bring us here, um, so that we can help this community live and thrive. So I think that's what community development is all about, helping a community to not just live, but thrive. And
Well,
it takes
let me add a little bit to that, where we've identified and kind of know what some of the issues are here in the community. How do we improve this community? Basically, it's community development. What do we need to do collectively to make this a better place, improve quality of life and stuff like that? For us, it's a process that's in motion. We have ongoing community meetings. We discuss issues, concerns with community members. And we are looking at how we can coalesce our resources to continue improving the quality of life here. We mentioned some of the challenges we have. Those are things you have to figure out how to resolve as you build community. And we're still working on it.
So something that stood out to me from what y'all have been saying and from what I already know about y'all is that it's not just, obviously you're creating this, you have this farm, but it's not just like the farming work. There's also a lot of advocacy that y'all have been doing, that your family has been doing. So can you share a little bit about that, about the advocacy work that y'all have been doing to support the residents of Allensworth?
Well, I'll say one of the first things we've done is make contact with universities. We have a whole lot of partners, tons of partners, because you can't build a community. One person cannot say, I'm going to build this community without getting partners involved. I mentioned earlier that one of our challenges is arsenic, naturally occurring arsenic in the groundwater. And just for context, Allensworth, this region in Allensworth happens to be the largest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi up until the late 1800s. So this was a huge lake, largest lake west of the freshwater lake west of the Mississippi. Most of the tributaries that drained into the lake were diverted for agricultural use and things like that. And for those that don't know, there's an act, I can't remember the name of the act offhand, but the act at that time says if you drain a body of water, the land is yours. So we had farmers that ended up draining this lake and ended up being one of them became the largest landowner in the United States at one point, probably still is. So with arsenic in the groundwater, we made contact with the Dr. Gadgil of the University of California in Berkeley. This is close to San Francisco. Dr. Gadgil had gone through a process where he could extract arsenic from groundwater. So we have a second phase of his lab, field lab here in Allensworth, where we've proven, or he's proven, and we believe, based on everything we've seen, that his technology can significantly reduce arsenic. It's an electrocoagulation process where iron electrodes are placed in arsenic-laden water. The electrodes are charged. It creates rust. The arsenic molecules bond onto the rust and settle. You skim the water from the top, you have drinking water, or arsenic-free drinking water. So that's one of the partnerships that we've worked on. We've also dealt with the legislature here in California and the governor's office here in California. Last year, we submitted a request to the governor's office through the legislature. The community received $40 million from the governor as part of his revised budget. $12 million of that is coming directly to the quote-unquote living community where we live, and $28 million is going to resuscitate, refurbish the state park. Dennis, do you want to touch on some other ones?
Well, we have a number of partnerships, as Kayode was just speaking to. There are some urban farmers in the Los Angeles area, and one of them is Crop Swap LA and Los Angeles, and the other is Compton Community Gardens, and we're working with them to help train some of their students, aspiring farmers, and we are working with them so that they can in turn be a distributor and help eliminate of the produce and help eliminate food deserts in those respective areas. There is a person up in the Sacramento area who is calls himself the worm whisperer. He's in vermiculture, and as Kayode was just talking earlier, we're going to use the rabbit manure for vermiculture and composting, and then take that and put it into the field and grow the produce, which makes it sustainable and regenerative. So we're partnering with him. He has the technology, the experience in doing this, but that's a key component of our whole operation. We worked with Center for Land-Based Learning up in Woodland, which is by UC Davis.
Close to the capital, Sacramento.
Yeah, okay, close to Sacramento. So we're partnering with them, the California Center for Cooperative Development, because we are looking at establishing a co-op so that people in the community and others who participate with us, we can share resources, equipment, that kind of thing, as well as buy the produce. The co-op will pay people proportionately for what they produce. So it just kind of helps build everybody up instead of just one person profiting.
Well, let me also add that in terms of climate change, one of the major push that we've undertaken here is to move away from wood burning, because in rural communities like ours, wood burning for heat and cooking is essentially the norm. When you look at the soot and the particulate matter that comes from wood burning, we end up with issues related to health. You know, the particulate matter 2.5 can lodge in the lungs, create cancer and stuff like that. So we pushed over the years to figure out how we get away from wood burning. And we worked with the California Public Utilities Commission, which, well, we started out with legislation that the governor signed that basically asked or put the onus or the burden on the California Public Utilities Commission to figure out how to migrate from wood burning or use of propane fuel, in our case, to move from that to electrification.
Mm-hmm.
The governor signed this bill. The Public Utilities Commission had several hearings, and in 2019, the commission approved electrification for Allensworth and 10 other communities, and they called those a pilot communities to test out this process, see how effective it could be. So we've gone from propane, wood burning to, you know, everything in, say, my household, Genesis household, is all electric at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And the push was to look at subsidizing or providing this energy through solar systems.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about burning fuel to create electricity, but using solar for us.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the infrastructure is already in place, almost every household has electricity. So all it took was the utility, in our case here, Pacific Gas and Electric, coming in, doing the retrofits, and converting everything to electricity for us.
Mm-hmm.
For us, it was important that we start looking at ways that we can minimize our carbon footprint moving forward. So these are all things that we're doing. Even some of the structures that we're looking to construct on the farm, we're looking at making sure that our carbon footprint is minimized.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also with the and Kay, you might want to speak to this, but Tri-County Water Authority, we've gotten some funding from through them, and at the same time, they are interested in working with us to help us have a more access to water. So you might want to say something about that, as their partners.
Yeah, a small community like ours, as you can imagine, not that much monetary resources. We rely on the county government to help us do certain things. But then it's just so much that the government would want to do, since they're not collecting any tax. There's no tax base here. There's no return for them. You spend money and there's no return. It's kind of hard to keep sending out money. So we have all these agreements and partners who are saying, we'll help you. Right now, we have a 40,000 gallon storage tank that serves a community of almost 600 people. We've had major fires where structures are completely consumed. The last one we had was in 2006, where 7 structures got destroyed, animals, and luckily we didn't have any humans killed. When the fire trucks come in with 40,000 gallons, boom, in no time, they backing out, going to adjoining communities looking for water. The studies we've done basically say we need a minimum of 500,000 gallons of water storage. We have a grant from the state. We're working on establishing that 500,000 gallon I mean, 40,000 to 500,000 gallons. And then, as Dennis just mentioned, we have an organization called Tri-County Water Authority that's gotten some grant money, and they're pursuing some additional grant monies to assist us with establishing a second 500,000 gallon storage tank. These are all things that a community needs. Now we're still talking community development. How do we improve the quality of life? So we're working with various partners to look at different aspects of needs in our community and how we can meet those. We have an organization called Self-Help Enterprises that constructs homes for low-income families, and they deal with community development in terms of establishing and constructing and putting in place various infrastructure, water, wastewater, and stuff like that. So we are partners with Self-Help Enterprises. We've done recently completed a sewer study, and we're now looking at how to fund it, looking at economies of scale and what does it mean in terms of managing a system like that. Can the community afford it? Can we consolidate the needs or the processes with other similar utilities, quote unquote, utilities at this point, where in most cases, operating and operations and maintenance of systems like this is where the money is. That's where everybody suffers. Can we have the operator, a single operator, manage several systems and not have just one operator managing a small system? So we're looking at those as a way to move forward at this point.
That's great. So not only are y'all farmers, but also working on so many other aspects, right? Getting cleaner air in the area, cleaner water, working on housing, so many different roles that y'all are taking on to catalyze this development. How do you, what are some of the strategies that you found most effective to catalyze and facilitate development that is not only sustainable, but is also equitable? Dennis, if you'd like to.
I think one of the strategies is, and you know, and this comes from me being a minister. We all have, human beings all have the same basic needs. We need to have food, healthy food. We need to have water, drinking water, potable water. We need to have clean air around us. And we need to be productive and have meaningful employment. So these are some of the things that we are looking at. You know, I think this is a strategic effort, what we are trying to do, because it's what you call a force multiplier. It has a cascading effect. This one thing helps to generate revenue. This farming effort generates revenue, and it enables the revenue to circulate within this community. It affords us an opportunity to have a store that there is no store here in this community. It affords us an opportunity to employ people. And the kind of farming that we will do will be more labor intensive as opposed to capital intensive, so that you know, we're not disrupting the pollinators and killing them with chemicals and stuff like that. But at the same time, we are looking at beautifying this community. We're looking at growing successive generations of farmers, Black, Indigenous, people of color, farmers. And we're not going to discriminate against anyone, but we want to grow a new generation of farmers. The average age of farmers in the United States is 60 plus. And I'm finding that young people are interested in agriculture. They need a way to get into agriculture because agriculture is expensive. And what makes it most expensive is the land and the equipment. That's capital stuff, and it's very costly. So this is a way of helping people get into that industry, and it gives them a path toward owning a farm. We will have not only just training, but we will have an incubator program where people can actually, after they've gone through the training, continue to work a parcel of land and be a part of the co-op, so that they are starting to get revenue from their efforts. So that's kind of where we are headed with this.
Well, approximately 8 years ago, we started a youth development program here in the community where every summer we take students from our, well, for those in the UK, the school system is slightly different. So I don't remember how that correlates, but we take our middle school 7th and 8th graders from our school and from schools in the adjoining communities here and send them through a 3 to 4 week program. And we get grants, and we give them a stipend, because if you don't, these students will go to the field with their parents and earn money picking grapes and doing other things on farms. But we pulling them out of that process and giving them some money and training them, giving them training in sciences, in organic farming, soils, water, contamination and remediation. So we're sending them through this process because we want this process to live and continue. So by grabbing our youth and training them and giving them ideas and education beyond classroom, field experience. I mean, we've rotated them through the Gadgill lab here, so they see what it takes for one technology to remove arsenic in groundwater. So we rotate our students through a whole bunch of these processes. We bring in botanists, we bring in biologists, we bring in civil engineers, all aspects of what they need to know to help with community building, community development, and a way of catalyzing sustainable and equitable economic development in the community continuum.
And one other thing, Tiffani, is we are working on building an organizational structure that will sustain this whole effort. It's not based on one person or two people. We are creating an organizational structure that has values that will be here in place long after we're gone.
Yeah, that's really important. That's amazing. So from what I've been hearing from y'all, I mean, obviously your work takes on so many different aspects, right? Like I mentioned before, not just farming, but also a lot of advocacy work and lots of partnerships, and just building deep relationships with not only your community members, but those in the nonprofit sector and those in the public sector to really to support this effort. And what I've also been hearing a lot about is like the importance of cooperatives and making sure everyone is able to benefit from the work that they're doing. So, which is all fantastic. And so I'm just curious, what is your vision for Allensworth and other rural communities like it? Maybe Kayode will start with you and then go to Dennis.
Well, the vision I see is a community that's self-reliant, self-sufficient, safe, well-served, culturally diverse. I see agritourism in our community. I just see, I don't want to use the word utopia. That gets to be kind of crazy to say. But I'm looking at a future where this community is a destination place. People will come here to learn about organic, sustainable agriculture. People will come here because we're looking to establish a cultural district. So you talk about foods based on organic cultivation. You're talking about music, art. So a lot of things that make this an attractive community, attractive, safe community. The Colonel had that vision. We intend to help him realize that vision. And that's why we're putting the time in it. We retired, decided to move to a rural. Folks ask us, other than farming, what the heck are you doing here? We are on a mission to improve this community and make it one that anybody that visits would enjoy.
That's great. Thank you, Kayode. Dennis?
Now, would you repeat that question?
Oh, yeah. What is your vision for Allensworth?
Yeah. You know, it's the vision that was given to me, and that was this community can be an asset to this region, to this county, as my brother-in-law's Kayode was talking about several times now. There's no tax base. Many of the people who live here in this community are renting, and so the properties are not as developed as they could be because they don't necessarily own it. Or if they do own it, they have such limited resources to build. And so we just want to work with what we have. And one of the things in working with what you have, you're able to build something that you can afford, as opposed to having to go out and secure a whole lot of money. One of the things that I believe for this community is we don't have to compete with each other. Living in the United States, our economic system encourages us to compete against one another and even destroy the competition. And when you do that, you are limiting what can happen. And I just look at this past summer, the baby formula. All of the producers of baby formula had been pretty much relegated to one umbrella, one company. And then when we started having the supply chain challenge, then there was no baby formula at all. Then it was a crisis for our country. So rather than to compete against each other to the extent that we even destroy the competition, I propose that you work in relationship with one another. And as you work in relationship with one another, then you have things in which to build. And I just use this anecdote. I remember as a child, and I was born into a humble existence, but I remember as a child, if my grandmother was going to make my twin sister and I a birthday cake, and she went to the cupboard to get the ingredients, she may have flour, she may have some sugar, maybe even some milk. But she may send one of us next door to get some butter, a stick of butter. She may send someone across the street and get a few eggs. And she may send someone else back behind the house across the alley to get some other ingredients, maybe a cup of sugar or something. And so individually, none of us may have had the ingredients to make a cake, but collectively, by pooling those resources together, now you got a cake. And the people who contributed, she sends cake. And so they would not have had any otherwise, but now they got cake, and they knew my grandmother, and they knew that she was a great cook. So now they're excited that they got some cake when they couldn't have maybe necessarily afforded it otherwise. And I believe that's the key for poor people to get ahead in our society. Stop competing. You don't have enough to compete against one another. Pool your resources together, and as you pool them together, now you all have something in which to build on. That's what I see, and that's what I if we can do that here in Allensworth, we can do that anywhere.
That's great. And that's also not just for folks who are like living in poverty, right? But I mean, that should be how we're all living with each other is to cooperate and to share.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that vision. Oh, Kayode, you're gonna.
Yeah, I just saw a question about is if there's a website, and you responded, Tiffany, but so everybody understands, the farm started as a for-profit farm. So the email address the website you just provided is an old address. We migrated the farm to the Allensworth migrating it to the Allensworth Progressive Association, which happens to be the original governing body of the community when it was first established. The Allensworth Progressive Association is now a 501, it's a nonprofit corporation here in California, and we felt it'll be in our best interest as we develop this community to have the farm managed by the Progressive Association. So the website is Allensworth P as in Peter, A as in Adam, allensworthpa.org.
Thank you for clarifying that, and I will drop that into the chat. Okay, so we're just gonna wrap up here, and we're gonna move into the Zoom in just a few minutes for a Q&A. And thank you to everyone who already dropped questions in. We've been tracking them, and so we'll get Dennis and Kayode to answer them in the Zoom room. But before we migrate over there, I just want to say thank you again to Kayode and Dennis. I really appreciated talking with you both and learning more about the farm and about both of you and all of the work that you and your family have been doing in Allensworth. And also want to give a big thank you to the Oxford Real Farming Conference for having us here, and for all the volunteers who have been making it possible, including Monica and Chris in our session. And also a thank you to Empowered Streaming, who's been handling all the tech and just making sure that that we can do this. So thank you so much to Jack who's been working with us here for this specific session. Any final words, Kayode and Dennis, before we switch rooms?
Well, it's definitely been a pleasure, Tiffany, to have you and the others from the organizing group have us talk about a community that we really believe in, a community that we hope some of you will come visit and enjoy someday.
And you have a state historic park here that really helps you to put it all in perspective. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.